Thank you for listening to this edition of the Christian Car Guy podcast. It's brought to you by Mr. Quick Pick Lock and Road. Mr. Quick Pick is the opportunity for you to start your own roadside assistance business. If you have more investment energy than investment capital, stop working for someone else. Mr. Quick Pick Lock and Road is the opportunity to have your own home-based business, working directly with auto clubs and leveraging a national brand and marketing strategy. Mr. Quick Pick helps people who have run out of gas, locked their keys in their car, or need a jump start. An A-plus rated company with the Better Business Bureau and the 3-time winner of the Members' Choice Award for customer service. This could be the chance you've been looking for to serve others at the point of crisis and even share your walk with Christ. So whether you're looking for a business opportunity or in need of emergency roadside assistance, choose Mr. Quick Pick Lock and Road. MrQuickPick.com. Now sit back and enjoy this podcast of the Christian Car Guy Radio Show.
Stay thirsty, my friends.
There's holmium and helium and hafnium and erbium and phosphorus and francium and fluorine and terbium and manganese and mercury, molybdenum, magnesium, dysprosium and scandium and cerium and cesium and lead, praseodymium and platinum, plutonium, palladium, promethium, potassium, polonium and tantalum, technetium, titanium, tellurium.
The signs keep changing every day, as stations everywhere are making me prepay.
Christian Car Guy Radio Show.
I say this calls for action, and now, nip it in the bud. Nip it in the bud. You got to nip it in the bud.
Negotiations Bible style. Bible style. Bible. Negotiations Bible style.
Pontiac, get a white dragon. Pontiac, get a white dragon. Pontiac, this will break away car this year.
Plutonium, palladium, promethium, potassium, polonium and tantalum, technetium, titanium, tellurium.
Stay thirsty, my friends.
Are we supposed to stay thirsty from gas? That's the question today on the Christian Car Guys Show. Lessons from gas thirst 2016. That's what I'm calling it. And if you're in the Southeast, you may know what I'm talking about. Those in Seattle this morning or out on the West Coast might not be as aware of it as we are, but something many people had never heard of until this week, the Colonial Pipeline. It had a leak, and so the next thing you know, man, things got heavy duty fast. There were rumors of, out of gas, and the next thing you know, people everywhere lined up to get the gas, and then they ran out of gas. And some people really had some struggles with this. But when we have struggles like this, like the time that all these people got stranded in the snow and whatever, there's lessons to be learned if we sit back and reflect on all this. And I would like to reflect on that today, but I know that you out there today, you learned a lesson or two, or you had an experience that we all could glean something from. What happened to you in the gas lane this week? Last week? What happened to you? What did you see that maybe surprised you or shocked you, or do you think is notable? We would love to hear it. We have lines open. This is a live show. What happened to you in the gas line? 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. And, of course, we have our good friend Jerry here, who's our Christian Body Shop guy. But he also happens to have a wrecker service. And, Jerry, you got way more calls to deliver gas than you normally get, I guess.
Yeah, the thing is, with motor clubs, a lot of the motor clubs, your program and your package, you'll have free gas delivery, and it'll be $5 of gas or a couple gallons of gas. And all of a sudden, whenever you get a scare like we had, people are in their driveway and they're taking advantage of that. People will take advantage of the system any way they can.
So I know you glean something. You have a story to share. We would love to hear it. 866. Call us. We have lines open at 866-348-7884. 866-348-7884. In my case, as the Christian Car Guy, sometimes being the Christian Car Guy creates struggles that maybe other people don't have. So you may remember last week we did this show from the Middle Eastern Christian Festival live. And right before the show happened, well, I should say before even that, because it's just generally, if you're the Christian Car Guy, Saturday morning when you go to get ready for your show, you go to a website called Petroleum Today that's put out by the Department of Energy. It's just something I've done for years and years and years and years to see what's going on with gas. So I was aware that the Colonial Pipeline had a small leakage, and I was aware that it was shut down for maintenance. All that was in there, but they mentioned nothing about any worry that the Department of Energy had of shortages. What they were concerned is that the gas station people would, raise the prices because they could get a rumor out that there was going to be this shortage of gasoline. But they had no idea what they'd done. As these gas stations started to spread the rumor that there was a gas shortage, the next thing you know, it was like a run on the bank, Jerry, and people came from everywhere. And although the Department of Energy did not anticipate any shortages, even though the pipeline had been down for a number of days, they knew it was coming back online, and there really wasn't a concern. But when everybody on the planet decides that they need to get gas, like, when it snows in North Carolina, everybody goes to get milk and bread, then ka-ching. I mean, so my wife, how does this affect the Christian Car Guy? Well, my wife is like, well, do I need to go get gas? I see these lines everywhere. Jerry saw lines of 20 minutes to even get down the street by the gas station.
Yeah, by Saturday night, it was, especially on southern part of Winston-Salem, I mean, they were lined up.
So I told my wife, mistakenly, because I had no anticipation of the panic. I said, Tammy, this is crazy. We're not running out of gas. The pipeline's going to start again on Wednesday. It's not going to be a problem. Don't worry about it. And she's like, okay, well, whatever day it was, she started to run out of gas, and she couldn't find any gas station with gas. I was in bad trouble. How could you not tell me, that this is because I had
Christian car guy didn't know.
Now, here comes the irony. The irony of the whole thing is that we have a feature on a Christian Car Guy show called Christian Car Guy Theater. And the lady that plays Gracie Gas Tank, I promise you, this is for real. Gracie Gas Tank, whose name is Ellen Kennedy, she texted me Saturday morning and said, are you aware that we're going to run out of gas? And I almost laughed when I saw the text, like, well, yeah, I mean, I know. But she was so right that, oh, my word. I mean, it became a crisis, but it was like self-fulfilling based on what happened, when people begin to panic. So we are going to discuss some things that we feel like we can learn. And one of those things is that mass shortages occur when the public panics over a possibility of running out of something they deem necessary. And so we're going to get into that a little bit. But the other thing that we're going to get into is the fuel delivery system in the U.S. you might see now is a bit fragile, and there is a monstrous amount of volume that goes through this pipeline. And I never really had sat there and analyzed it until the last couple of days. I've really been thinking about this. And I don't know if you know this, but here's just a factoid to kind of put your mind around. The Colonial Pipeline distributes 100 times 10 to the sixth power gallons of gasoline a day. Now, the reason why I'm saying 100 times 10 to the sixth power is because I can't say that number. That's above billions and trillions and all that.
Well, I was going to try to get you to explain exactly in terms that I could understand exactly how much gas that is, and all the listeners would know. Okay,
100 times 10 to the sixth power gallons of gasoline a day go through this pipeline. So it is a massive, monstrous amount of volume that's being dispensed, and numbers that are really just something to think about. But another thing that we really have to consider here that we could learn and glean and begin to understand, and what I want to talk about today in a Christian Car Guy show, is the shelf life of gasoline is not very long compared to what it used to be. In the old days, when we had leaded gasolines and they didn't put the additives in it to add octane like they do today, and now that we have ethanol in our gasoline, gives it a shelf life of like 3 months. And so those people who hoarded gasoline thinking, oh my, I need you to know today that we need to dispense this gasoline quickly because you can't keep it a year from now. It won't be any good. In fact, it badly hurt whatever it is that you put it in. So you can't hoard gasoline. It has to flow. And so that leads to item number 4. Understanding the properties of modern gasoline mixtures can save you big problems, because there's other things to consider besides its shelf life and the different mixtures of gasoline that we can learn all from this. And we're going to study this today on a Christian Car Guy show. And we're going to go into detail all these things. But the one cool thing about it all, as you might guess I was going, Jerry, is the reflection of the spiritual in this. And you can't help but note that, wow, the 10 virgins, right? They had an oil shortage. And these 10 virgins, they didn't have to wait in a long line, but they unfortunately, they experienced an oil shortage. And so, there's a lot of spiritual stuff to be learned right here with oil shortages, and we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about, we have some updates for the Jesus Labor Love car repair labor for single moms, widows. We had some miraculous things happen this week. I want to share those with you as well. But most of all, I want to hear your story. What happened in the gas line? How long did you have to wait? What did you see? Did you see somebody like me that had a 55-gallon drum in the back of their truck that they were filling up with gasoline, hoarding 14 gas cans in the back that they were filled up their car and all that? I would love to know. 866-348-7884 is the number to call in and share. We would love your story. What happened to you in the gas line? So we have all that and more coming back with Jerry. He has his stories. I have mine. What can we learn about gas in this country? 866-348-7884 is the number to call in with any question or comment. We have so much more Christian Car Guy show coming up. Stay tuned.
Well, if you ever plan to go to West,
There's yttrium, ytterbium, actinium, rubidium, and boron, gadolinium, niobium, iridium, and strontium, and silicon, and silver, and samarium, and bismuth, bromine, lithium, beryllium, and barium. There's holmium, and helium, and hafnium, and erbium, and phosphorus.
Now, I
and francium,
went to
and
great
fluorine,
lengths,
and
Jerry,
terbium,
to
and
find
manganese,
this
and
little
mercury,
soundbite
and
here.
dysprosium, and scandium, and cerium, and
Not
Now,
on
this is
everybody's
the
MP3.
The chemical properties of gasoline, just not really. But it sounds it sounds good, because when you start studying this stuff, it's about as confusing. You have all these carbon atoms that make octane and all this stuff that sounds like. But when you look into these gasoline issues, you can't help but come across some of these things. So we're going to get into some of those things that mix up gas and why that affects shelf life and how that can affect you and your car, and why you might know. You don't need to know all those properties, but you do need to know certain things about your gasoline in order to not cause yourself big trouble down the line. But as we were talking about, we want to glean a few things from this experience of the gas shortage. And the first one that I would love your wisdom on, by the way, and because I personally got burned by this week, but, when mass shortages occur, mass shortages do occur when the public panics over the possibility of running out of something, whether it's bread and milk in a snowstorm or, in the case of gasoline, when all of a sudden people get word that there's a gas shortage. So what's a Christian to do in this situation? You too can be affected, obviously, but what do you think? And I would love to know your answer. When you see mass people going out there and filling up 55-gallon drums of gasoline, realizing that if everybody just goes hordes, that we're all going to run out of gas. What's our role in that? I'm curious. 866-348-7884. We actually have Ann in Huntersville, and she may have an answer for us, Ann.
Well, I do.
All right.
I have a very spiritual application here, and I, too, am a member of Christian Car Guy Theater. And I, too...
Did you think it was funny that Gracie Gas Tank sent me that text?
I thought it was hysterical. Well, the thing is, she sent it to me, too, you see. Now, the difference between you and me is that I took it seriously. And, she woke me up, with this text, and I threw some clothes on and dashed to the gas station. Thankfully, there weren't any other people around. Now, see, I don't even have an extra thing to you know.
They don't have a gas can to go fill up?
No, I don't. But I have a gas tank to fill up, and I was half empty, which is very symbolic right there. And so I filled up with gas. I had, as the Bible says, fresh oil, and I felt so much better. I mean, I was half asleep, but I managed to get the gas, and you know. So the point is, I listened, unlike some of us.
Yeah, we think we know it all because we're like, there's no gas shortage. But you don't realize what's going to happen.
Yeah, there are a lot of spiritual applications here, I think, you know.
There really, really is. You weren't one of those 10 virgins. I was one of those that was just caught short. And not me. I had gas. It was what's worse is it was my wife.
Your wife.
You know? So that's just how that goes. Well, God bless you, Ann. And by the way, we were supposed to have an episode of Christian Car Guy Theater. We had some technical difficulties. We will get that to you next week. It's so exciting what's going to happen to Allie. You don't want to miss that. Tune in next week for Christian Car Guy Theater.
Exciting.
And
well, you
Frenchie
guys have
Fender
a great
with
day.
Ann. Yes, thank you, Ann. God bless.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. 866-348-7884. What was your experience? And maybe what do you think a Christian should do when you're faced with this? And again, you might be in Seattle and you weren't affected by this. So good. You can sit back and tell us in the Southeast, what should we have done under these circumstances? What do you think, Jerry?
Well, I think one thing that sometimes when they give warnings and the government and other agencies, I think they do in a way factor in the human aspect of it, but I don't know if they really, if it's easy to factor in the panic of the human aspect of it. And I think that's what it all, so many times when we get into a situation like that and get ourselves all worked up, it's just really what we do to ourselves. And in a way, you ought to learn we should have learned in the past, in the 70s with the gas crisis and all the lines and then even to the, every year, like I said, whenever they call for snow or sleet, I mean, people don't even drink milk. They may drink a pint of milk a month, and they go out and buy 2 gallons of milk and 6 loaves of bread, and you go into the store and they're bare. And then what happens in a few days or a week or so, they're throwing all that throwing it out and dumping it down the drain because it's gone bad. I mean, we just panic. And you look at the marketing aspect of it, what's going to drive up demand is the fact that people think it's not going to be available. I don't know how much of the marketing, Mattel and all these other companies for Christmas and stuff, if something's hot, you'll usually hear that there's a scare that there's going to be a shortage of that, and then all of a sudden they just fly off the shelves because everybody's running out to get it. And I think that makes other people want it. I think if you hear there's going to be a shortage of gas, the best thing we can do is just be reasonable.
And I think, do unto others as you'd have them, do I need to fill up that extra tank of gas? Do I need to, take more? What do I need? And you obviously you want to meet your own needs and your family's needs, but hoarding is, therein lies the question of where is hoarding and where is that of taking what you need is the line that you got to figure out how to stay. But obviously I can see Kim, our producer, he has something he wants to add here.
Well, I have a question. Would some of the gas stations contribute to the problem of the panic? Because I had a friend of mine, he said a gas station that he uses close to his house, and he said one of the attendants was out there measuring the gas tank, and she said that the company told her whenever to get to a certain level to shut the gas off because there's a possibility that air would get into your gas tank, and that's a possible lawsuit maybe.
Well, that's a great question, Kim. That's a great question. And we need to talk about, there's several things that they're thinking about when they're dipping their tanks like that. And the gas stations do have their role in what's going on with that. But we need your comments. 866-348-7884. We're trying to learn about gas here on the Christian Car Guy Show. 866-348-7884.
The price of gas is killing me. I wish I owned stock in an oil company. 'Cause I want to go on a vacation somewhere half across the nation.
Lessons from Gas Thirst 2016. That's what we're talking about today on the Christian Car Guys Show. What can we glean from what happened in the Southeast? The Colonial Pipeline had a leak. It only lost 300, and it sounds like a lot of gas, but
Till you throw that other number you threw out earlier.
Throwing out that number, it's a fraction of what goes through those pipelines a day. 336,000 gallons is what was actually down in those storage ponds, and it's pretty cool stuff to look at. How the EPA is actually getting that water out of the gas, or the gas out of the water that it went into in these holding ponds, and all that they did it, and how they made the bypasses and all that stuff. Pretty cool technology, but nonetheless, the pipeline stopped for 9 days, and then the Southeast experienced a shortage. But then that was compounded by the fact that the panic of the general population was everybody ran out to get gas, which, it's like a run on the bank. When everybody decides to get gas and fill up every tank they got, and even their gas cans out back and whatever else, you create this situation. But question right before the break that our producer Kim asked is, what role do the gas stations play in that? And, what's involved with some of the suppliers and whatever. And one of the common misunderstandings for a lot of us is, wow, why is it that as soon as a rumor happens that a hurricane may hit a refinery in Houston, that all of a sudden the price of gas goes up at the pump 10 cents a gallon, when clearly that gas sitting in the ground can't have anything to do with the price of oil right now or what's happening with the refineries down in the Gulf. But Jerry, there clearly is a connection because we don't really understand the way gas gets priced. And you can help clarify that, being in your line of work.
Yeah, it's the gas in the tanks at these gas stations really on consignment, because when the truck pulls up, they're not paying for that gas. And the way they keep up and track it is when it goes through the pump. When a customer pulls up and pumps that gas out, that's where they get their profit margin, but that's also where they get the numbers of how much gas is being purchased. So when that increase comes, it really doesn't affect those local stations. And they're sort of put out there as the bad guy sometimes, because people think, you're making all this money because all of a sudden last week I was paying, or this morning I gave a $1.99 a gallon or $2.99 a gallon, and I came by 2 hours later to bring my wife's car and it's went up 45 cents. Well, their margin is no different. I mean, they still make 2 cents a gallon, let's just say. I mean, because it is so slim, that margin of profit. Now, the industry, the suppliers, the Shells and the Exxons and the BPs and all this stuff, they're the suppliers. Yeah, it does affect them, what's already out in the system. When the gas goes up there, it does increase that profit margin. But the local people and the local stations, they're just out there just trying to do the best they can, and that's doesn't affect them. So
yeah, and the other thing that Kim brought up is these people, they're going out there dipping those tanks. And you do need to know something about that. In fact, it gets into this whole formulation of gas and understanding something about gas. That gas has a much shorter shelf life based on the additives that they use today, and based on the fact that we have ethanol in our gas. And ethanol is not as stable as the old-fashioned gasoline, and it changes the shelf life of the gasoline. So the reason, and it also changes that ethanol is easily contaminated by water. So what Kim described was that a girl was out there dipping the tank to see how much, because they don't want it to fall below a certain level. And the reason they're doing that is when it gets down to below a certain level, number one, it can pick up water, and water will contaminate E10 in a heartbeat. It will contaminate. If it gets into somebody's car, the next thing you know, that gas station is going to be facing a lawsuit to replace a fuel injection system or whatever, fairly expensive. I've done a lot of that work, and I bet you have too, Jerry, where a gas station had to pay for that because they let their tanks get too low, and they either picked up trash or they picked up water from the bottom of their tank. So they do have to do that. And something like this, where they're all running out of gas, to them running out of gas is when that tank reaches a certain level, because they can't let it go too low, because they don't want to pick up stuff that will hurt your fuel. Which gets into another thing that we can glean from this, and that is the shelf life of gasoline is really today the way that most people would pump gasoline. They're going to get E10, right? And, that means 10% of the gasoline has got some ethanol in it. Well, as soon as you add any ethanol to gasoline, now you've changed the volatility of the gasoline. And the volatility is the good part of the gasoline. In other words, we need it to make fumes so that it will explode and cause our cars to go. And what happens when you add, something that's not as dense as gasoline, like ethanol, in other words, it's not got as much unvapor to it, it becomes a lot more. In other words, ethanol will evaporate much quicker than gasoline will. And when you take the volatility out of the gasoline, it no longer burns properly. And so now it begins to clog up things and cause problems with inside your car. Not to mention that E10 or ethanol is so easily contaminated by water because it's got completely different ways that it mixes than other things, right, Jerry?
Yeah, and so many times we, you don't take into consideration that, well, we have a car that sits, and we see this a lot in the towing part of our business and stuff, where a car had been sitting for a year. Well, I went out and cranked it up a couple of times. Every few weeks I try to crank it up, but then when they get it out on the road, it won't run. And the problem is the fact that they've allowed the gas to sit in there so long, because it's still the same tank of gas that's been sitting in that vehicle for a year. And you got to start you just don't realize and factor that in. And like you said, gas only has a shelf life of so long. And now these cars, really what we put in there right out of the pump is it's pushed it right up to the line to make these engines run properly because of all the additives and
the
ethanol.
So if you're going to store your car, this is a place to learn. And, that's the reason why we hope this show is helpful to you. Is your car is going to sit there all summer, or it's going to sit for 4 months. Don't fill it up and go let it sit. Because the good news about gasoline, unlike other things, shelf life, is fresh gasoline reverberates old gasoline. So if you got like a sixth of a tank or eighth of a tank or even a third of a tank sitting in there, and you go fill it up with fresh gasoline that's brand new out of it, that totally reverberates all that old gasoline. It will all burn right out of the system. So if you're going to store your car, don't go fill it up with gas. Let it sit there fairly. And again, you don't want it to be empty, but what do you think? A quarter of a tank, something like that, Jerry?
Yeah, I wouldn't go over that because that's the key. And before you put many miles on it, make sure if you're going to start driving it again, go ahead and get the gas put in it.
Yeah, why not even, if it's really been sitting there a year, if it were me, and I know that car's been sitting there a year and it's got a quarter of a tank of gas, I would go buy 5 gallons of gas in a gas can that's brand new, fresh gas, and put it in that gas tank before I even drove it to the gas station, because you don't want that old contaminated gas to clog up the system. And the good news is it even though you can buy fuel additives that, they're stabilizers, they're called, or something along those lines, and they're okay. But there's nothing like fresh gas going into that gas tank to reverberate the old gas that's in there. And away you go. So that's, one of the things that you can clearly learn from this.
Yeah, and guys have been in this business or been driving for a while. That was a thing back a few years ago. You'd always say, well, if I'm going to let it sit long, I'm going to fill it all the way up, because that way it doesn't get any moisture in it. And I want to have a full tank, which is just the opposite now. You got to completely change the way you think.
Yeah, because, again, leaded gasoline in the old days, and it was pure, it was a completely different ball game. And that gas had a long shelf life, but today's gas does not. So if you made them, if you went out and bought a bunch of gas cans full of gas, why not just burn that stuff off as quickly as you as you possibly can? And just like
when you bought all that milk and bread, no need pouring it down the drain and throw it in the trash can. Go ahead and burn it off, because it's not gonna be a quality product you put in your vehicle if you wait a few months.
Yeah. So, getting back to some of these things that we can learn, the other thing that I think is significant is how easily the country gets in a problem if this pipeline has a problem, and so it's fragile. The system is fragile. In other words, this pipeline's got to deliver, and I didn't even really put it all together in my head until all this happened, that we have a big Colonial dispensary in North Carolina. And when you go by the airport in Greensboro, you'll see this huge tank farm, and it says Colonial Pipeline. Well, that's where the pipeline is coming into the city of Greensboro. And that's distributed all over this area for quite a ways based on that tank farm right there, Jerry. And I guess maybe you knew that. But when you see that big CP on there, that's the Colonial Pipeline, and that's what's going on with that. And since this system is somewhat fragile, you can't help but say, well, gee, what do I do with my family, if something happens to this system and bicycles and transportation, and think through some of these things. The cool thing is we get to see the spiritual aspects of that. We're going to talk about that in the last segment of the show. Plus, you may still be sitting on something you want to share. So you do that. 866-348-7884. You call us 866-34-TRUTH. A lot more coming up. Yes, strength will rise as we wait upon the Lord, and sometimes we wait upon the Lord with our lamps like the virgins, and that requires oil, and so we're going to get into that.
There we go. You got tied in.
We certainly want to, but we want to carry a couple points forward from the previous talk. We're talking about what lessons that we can learn from the gas shortage we have experienced here in the Southeast over the last week, and one of the things that just kind of trying to get my mind around is that gasoline has to continue to flow for our system to work. In other words, because the shelf life of gasoline is short and it's such huge amount of volumes, we talked about it. 100 times 10 to the sixth power of gallons of gasoline is flowing through this pipeline. So, and it doesn't have a long shelf life. So they are counting on you. The oil companies and all the people producing oil and all this, they're counting on you to buy big, huge vehicles, SUVs and four-door pickup trucks and all this stuff to burn all this fuel because they are producing it and it can't sit in the ground. But interestingly, when we have something like this happen and everybody goes and hoards gas, then the next thing you know, we're going to see a glut of gas and a glut of oil. And then guess what? The price has got to drop so that they get you to go out and buy even more gas and go on more trips and all kind of things like that. We got Ken is in Colfax, North Carolina. He's got a gas story for us. Ken, you're on the Christian Car Guy Show. Good morning.
Good morning. When this thing started transpiring over the weekend, at first I thought it was just a hoax, and then I went to a service station, seen the yellow bags and everything, but my mind went back to when back in 71, I worked at a service station on Spring Garden in Greensboro, and we were selling gas for 15 cents a gallon. We were having a gas war, and we had all these farmers and people coming in with the big oil tanks and filling their gas up, and there was plenty of gas. They were just, I don't know if they were hoarding it, they were just taking advantage of a good price. But then it was like, a few years later, we had this shortage, whether it was created or whatever, and the gas lines in Greensboro, and you had to sit in line all morning, and you couldn't get but $5 a gallon. And I said all to say this: when this thing started, my heart started racing. I said, "What do I need to do? I've got some doctor appointments. I better cancel. I'm not going to have gas to get." And then I said, "I wonder if I even got enough gas to go to church." And then I realized that how much patience the Lord has given me over the years. And He said, "Don't worry about it." And it was just a couple of days after that, I went and bought gas, and it was even cheaper than they said it was. The national average or the North Carolina average. I bought it for $2.09, just like it was before the shortage. And
you waited on him, and
the Lord. Yeah, I didn't always have that patience. You know, I remember, of course, $5 worth of gas back then was a lot more than it is now, but still you could not buy but $5 at a time. And some of the attendants were packing guns. They were having so many problems. And, you know, this fear comes on people sometimes. And if they are a Christian, they need to exercise some of the patience. I'm not going to say pray for it, but exercise some of the patience that God gives us.
Thank you, Ken. God bless you. I appreciate that. That's exactly what I needed to hear today. I'm so glad you called in. Thank you. And we would love to take your call. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. Well, I did want to get to the spiritual side of this that I saw, and as I was thinking through this morning and, you know, actually over the last few days, that here were these 10 virgins. And clearly they had an oil shortage, and they had to wait in line, and they were asking each other for light. The interesting thing, and had they panicked like the people in North Carolina back when they realized they were going to have a shortage earlier before the bridegroom had any chance of showing up, rather than being lazy, but had they really had a thirst, and that's the reason why I use that word, because Jesus said, blessed are those who thirst. And the question is, do we thirst for the oil, the anointing that God provides? And I want you to think with me for a minute about what it says. And I actually looked at this passage in a new light this week. In John chapter 4, in the Gospel of John chapter 1, verse 4, it says, in him was the life, and the life is the light of men. Now, light comes from oil. And you may recall in Zechariah, there's this really cool picture of these two olive trees, and these olive trees have got this fruit, and the fruit of the olives is coming down into these vats, and it's creating oil, and it's lighting the menorah. And so as we abide in the vine, we bear fruit. And the vine being Christ, you see, and that fruit creates oil, which illuminates. It's the light of men that other people can follow. So as you're standing in the gas line and you go, hey, you know what? I only need 5 gallons. I don't really need to fill up right now. I'll have enough. And if I do my part, the fruit of you, whatever that is that you're doing, and I'm not saying it has to do with necessarily gas, but whatever the fruit is that you're doing and other people have an opportunity to see that in your life, that is the light of men. And if we had that kind of thirst, where we were panicky because we are feeling dry. You know, I'm not feeling the Lord like I felt him yesterday. I'm feeling dry, so I need to I need to go get a fill up. I got to fill up. You know, then we really felt this urgency. How much more light would there have been for the bridegroom when he showed up? You see what the picture was? How cool would it have been for that bridegroom to have all this light as he was approaching the bride? And each of us, we can only do with what we can do. We can only fill up our own lamps. But, you know, it's a cool thing, Jerry. I love the picture.
You know, I'm sitting there as you're saying that, and what come to mind, you talk about thirst, and we have that thirst for fuel, and when it snows, we have that thirst to make sure we have enough bread and eggs and all that stuff, and we rush out and try to get it no matter how long the line is. What if in the morning I pull up in the parking lot of Pinedale Christian Church, and you pull up at Calvary, and there's people lined up outside the building to get in because they're thirsting for Jesus Christ? What an impact. I mean, but that should be what we should be thirsting for every day.
And that's why we can be salt. Because if we can be salt, then we create that thirst. It's interesting how God gave us all these pictures. Yeah. And if we look around, you know, hardly a week could go by that he doesn't give us some great illustration of something. Wow, there's something to this oil thing.
Yeah. And you know what? If we think we're going to run out of oil, we're going to tell everybody. If we know a trick to get the fuel, we're going to tell everybody we know, all of our family and stuff. Why shouldn't we be doing the same thing with the gospel of Jesus Christ?
And speaking of oil, we had so much oil in the Jesus Labor Love this week car repair labor for single moms and widows. Tremendous donations came in. I have to tell you, Jerry, the lady that was living in her car in New York, we got the money for her radiator. There was somebody else that was donated a brand new van. There was another van given away last week that I got to see this in between. The oil is flowing, folks. Thank you so much for all you do for the Christian Car Guy Show, the Jesus Labor Love, listening and participating. And remember, slow down. Jesus walked everywhere he went, and he got it all done in 33 years. And so stay thirsty, my friends.
Absolutely.